Well, before we dive into our own introductions, I'd love to just get a quick sense of who's in the room. And maybe we could even just do, we have enough of you, we could just do like rapid fire. Could you say, no, never mind. Let's do hands because it might be more interesting. Could you raise your hand if you are from a state level, if your primary focus is within your state? Okay, national? Okay, so mostly national scale groups. Okay. 50-50. And how many, and in terms of, would you say is your organization's primary focus on, I don't know if democracy is a fair theme or if it's one of the, versus say one of the, if you're more like, say, Common Cause, working primarily on issues of democracy? Okay, great. And then the rest would be kind of other issues, more deeply on other issues? You can say if it didn't fit into that category. Okay. Any other questions that you guys think that you're curious about? Okay. Last question I have then would be, would you consider yourself a internet era institution, like you grew up, your organization has kind of grew up in the last 10 years, or if you're like my organization, Greenpeace, or a Common Cause, existed long before internet. So pre-internet? Okay, and then internet youngin? Okay, great, okay. Helpful, well thanks for being in this. Here's the format. We'll start off with some introductions, let you know who we are, and then dive into some discussion amongst us, going through some themes that we thought were interesting when it came to this topic. I'm gonna try to channel my best Melissa Harris Perry or Chuck Todd, as the case may be, and try and keep us jumping around so no offenses will hopefully be taken when I cut us off and move us to something else very quickly. But we are heading in a direction where we also will have lots of time for questions, hopefully. So if we don't do them along the way, we'll definitely do them in the end and make this as useful as possible for everyone who's here. Anastasia, would you be willing to kick us off and tell us who you are, how you came to this, and what your organization does?
Hi, everyone. I'm Anastasia Koo. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for the Human Rights Campaign. We are the country's largest organization dedicated to lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and gay equality. I have been there for 10 years, and as I was telling my fellow panelists, long enough to remember what it was like to lose. I came at 2004, 2005, right after the 2004 elections, if you'll remember, where the community was largely and unfairly blamed for that presidential election. And so it was a very challenging environment, but what a difference 10 years makes in a movement. And I'm really proud and gratified to have played a small role in that. I cut my teeth actually at Greenpeace. I was there for 6 years working on communications issues, and I think it really was at that organization where I found a real love and passion for how to creatively communicate, and I'm really fortunate to work for an organization now that values that and really prioritizes interaction, engagement, and strong communication with our membership and community. So excited to be here. Thank you to Common Cause for having me, and look forward to a great discussion with my fellow panelists.
Okay, this is fancy technology, so getting used to it. My name is Greisa Martinez. I'm the Advocacy Director for United We Dream. UWD is the largest immigrant youth-led network in the country. It includes women, LGBTQ people, people of color, and really our goal is to be able to expand what we think about as when we say we the people. In our preamble in this constitution, like, does it include undocumented people? Does it include women? How does it include Black people and indigenous people of color? All of it grounded around the big immigration issue that we're talking about today. And so UWD is a fairly new organization. We started in 2010. I've been organizing for the past 10 years to expand rights of workers, of women, and of undocumented people in this country. And really the way that I came into this work is because I grew up poor in the state of Texas as an undocumented woman. And what United We Dream has meant for my life and the life of millions of other people has been finding my voice, finding the opportunity to be here in Washington, D.C. with a group of people that have been building and are committed to making this country better. Finding myself here and sometimes pinching myself. And what we want to create is opportunities for other young people like myself that are finding themselves now in North Carolina and the rural areas of those places to find their voice and to ensure that that the policies of this country are things that will benefit in their lives. Thanks for having us.
Hi, my name is Ruth Martin. I'm a senior campaign director at MomsRising.org. Moms Rising is about 10 years old. We're one of the internet baby organizations. We have over 1 million members across the country in every congressional district. And we are mostly moms, but how many people here are moms? Raise your hands. Right? Okay. How many have kids? Just keep them up. Keep them up. All right. How many of you know a mom? How many of you have a mom? How many of you have a belly button? Okay, you're all in. You're now all eligible to be members of Moms Rising. We're so glad you're here. So, in fact, we put stickers. I put stickers on your table. You can take those home, too. At Moms Rising, like I said, we're about 1 million strong. Our mission is to build a country where families and businesses can both thrive. We think that's absolutely possible. I came to the work after I became a mom, actually. I had been familiar with Moms Rising and had kind of watched it get started when I was at People for the American Way, actually doing a lot of work on voter ID, along with Jenny and a bunch of other Common Cause folks, so that was really fun. But I'm a white, middle-class, cisgendered woman. Nobody's ever asked me for ID when I've needed to go vote, and I haven't faced a lot of problems in that arena, and I cared deeply about it. I became a parent. I had left People For, and a couple other jobs. I became a parent working at an advocacy organization here in the area, and I realized that, like a lot of other big organizations, have no, not the world's best paid sick days policies, certainly not very good paid family leave policies, and I had to use a lot of paid sick days and other things that I was really lucky to have in the first place in order to finance being able to stay home with my kids. Only 13% of working Americans have access to paid family leave through their employer. That means most of you don't. A lot of you probably do, but most of us don't. And so it became like a very real issue to me as I was facing, years worth of well-child checkups, never mind the stuff that sends you to the emergency room or keeps you up at night, like the unending cases of pink eye. And so that is what brought me to Moms Rising. I've been here for about 6 years, and I love it. And what we do is bring forward the voices of women and families to affect change. And we are at a tipping point, I think, on a number of issues that we work at. So I'm excited to be on this panel in a couple years to be like, yay, I've been at Moms Rising long enough to know when our issues weren't winning either, but now you all have paid family leave, so this is great. We won. Yay.
Oh, thank you. And my name is Michael. I lead a digital mobilization lab for Greenpeace internationally. We are supporting Greenpeace's transition as well as that of our allies from as I was saying earlier, kind of a pre-internet era of campaigning to a different campaigning landscape that we see ourselves now in, one where we realize that anyone with a smartphone or any piece of technology can now mobilize others, communicate, raise money, and do many of the things that used to only be in the hands of kind of professionalized organizations. So we are going through an exciting transition that is on this very topic, and we help our organization and our partners and allies introduce new tools, new ways of working, new strategies for campaigning in this modern people-powered landscape. And for Greenpeace, we see it as it's actually essential for how we win campaigns. my background, and we can talk more about that as we get into discussion about what this all means. But I came into this work through a kind of grand experiment, I guess, in participatory politics, the Howard Dean presidential campaign, 2003. And it was the first time I think a lot of us had seen the internet play a role in enabling hundreds of thousands of people to have a hand in politics or have a voice in politics in a way that hadn't maybe existed for many decades in quite the same way. So that's my lens on how I come into this topic, and personally see this is one of my favorite topics because I see incredible potential for how the effective engagement of people in our work and our missions can transform not only our work, but our country and democracy. So with that, we want to start off, I think, at this strategic level, asking the question of, why do people matter in our work? And I'm curious to just hear how, for each of your organizations, if we were to run up to someone else randomly inside your organization and say, how do people, the million or hundreds of thousands of people that you're connected to and that you engage in your work, what role do they play, or why do they matter to your organization? Why spend time at all engaging them? What is it that makes them relevant to your mission? Go ahead, and Ruth, if you want to kick us off there.
Thank you. What a great question. Our members, our over 1 million members across the country, they are the engine that keeps Moms Rising moving. We can't do anything without them. It's our entire thing is about bringing forward their voices. What we like to say is that, when a bunch of different people are having the same problems, when a low-wage worker, when 80% of low-wage workers can't earn a single paid sick day, when only 13% of people have access to paid family leave, when the vast majority of people who actually do have access to FMLA, the job protected but unpaid leave, can't use it because it's unpaid, when child care costs more than college in half of the states in this country, this is not an epidemic of personal failings. This is a systematic problem. And when we all start telling our stories, when all of our members start telling their stories and raise them up, closer. Okay. Is this better? Okay, great. When we all start telling our stories, we can make change happen. We know our policymakers and legislators, and you guys probably crunch a lot of data, and that is super important, but we also know that the best stories are the ones that are the personal stories, that's what you need to make those data points stick, and that is what our members do. They make those data points stick, they put a face on the problem, and they help make change. So we couldn't do it without them. We would be nothing.
Great. Gracia, I feel like when we talked about this a bit, you almost had trouble making a separation between the organization and the people, because you were saying the people you work with are the whole existence. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, so for United We Dream, it's not that we have a constituency of undocumented people and you have a whole staff that's trying to figure out how to upraise their voices. It's that we are the undocumented people. We have built an organization that the person that runs our HR is undocumented or has been undocumented in their life. And so if you were to ask any of our members today, and they're in places like Texas, California, Connecticut, New York, and you would say, like, so how do you see yourself in United We Dream? Like, they would say, I'm an organizer, and I am building my community to be able to make sure that all of us are stronger. And so the basis of like where United We Dream sort of engages with ourselves is to be able to label who we are and what we're doing, what's our role within the organization, and how is it that it's all connected to this shared purpose that we're moving forward. So I would say that they wouldn't say like I'm in the engagement ladder level 3 or whatever it would say. It would be I'm an organizer with United We Dream, and and this is let me tell you about the campaign, and will you come and do some calls with us? And that's what they would say.
Right. Thanks. How about for you, Anastasia? And what have you, and how have you, I'm curious also, you've been with HRC for 10 years.
Yeah.
So how has it always been the same, or has there been evolution in terms of how
Well, I think, you know, like my fellow panelists, the politics are personal. So when we're talking about the change of, you know, being discriminated against or not being able to get married or wanting to start a family, I mean, the issues that we work on affect people. And, you know, we have a real responsibility to you know, push forward very quickly because there's a sense of urgency around that. I think, like the other organizations up here, we're also people-powered. I think for us, we made a, long before I arrived, but a very thoughtful and strategic path that the LGBTQ community was not going to win on its own. As a minority, that we really needed to proactively engage straight America, and that was a really central piece to how we were going to sort of make people, other people, feel like they were part of the organization. So, you know, at one time, people in a very sort of quiet way would put our logo on the back of their car. And people knew like that was something gay. It was a point of self-identification. And I think, you know, a very political act. What we set out to do was grow that. So it didn't just mean that you were part of the community, it meant that you were supporting the community. And I think that has been really key and critical to the success that we've had, not only as an organization, but as a movement. Like you can't do it alone. And, you know, even though there are, you know, millions of people that are part of the community, there are millions more that are not. And that was a key part of my job, is to helping change hearts and minds to the side of equality. For people that, you know, were likely supportive, that were straight, and really sort of push them towards embracing it in a bigger way.
Yeah, and I'll just add for Greenpeace, I think what I was about to say earlier in the intro is I think we're a global campaigning organization, and there's always targets involved in our work, and people we're trying to kind of move, whether it's a policymaker or corporate power. And I think the insight our organization has had over the last number of years is that it's no longer possible for us to win alone. So we can't achieve a victory if it's just, say, you know, Greenpeace doing some bold actions or even leading a nonviolent direct action that generates tons of media and is really powerful. Greenpeace alone, it's no longer significant enough, even if you're driving the entire somehow successfully driving the entire media cycle, that it's only through voters or consumers putting pressure as well in concert with an organization like ours that can make that difference. I'm curious if culturally, just while we're still at this strategic level of how does people power work, or what role do people play with your organizations? Are there any kind of open debates about whether or not, I'm just interested culturally, I know many organizations struggle with this question of, should we invest in, you know, all the things that are required in order to keep people engaged, or organizing work, right? We see this with presidential campaigns, this constant fight between media. We could just put all this money in media, and just someone can make an ad and done, right? Versus organizing, which is so much more complicated and can take more time. And, you know, are there any struggles within your organizations or open debates about, you know, is it worth all this effort or investment to get to the places that you've described thus far?
For us, I mean, we really strongly believe we have a very robust volunteer structure, and really it's sort of part of the tiered engagement strategy. Very engaged board. I think we need them. I mean, they are the faces of our organization around the country. And when it comes to, you know, organizing, you know, we really that's a competency of ours, and really believe in it. So we've not had that debate. We never really have the money to put on a big, you know, a TV ad or something like that, although I'd love to. But I think, you know, we really recognize, you know, the value and impact that people have. But also, you know, we are small but mighty. I mean, we have a small internal team, and we just make things really big. And I think that's just sort of the mission, and sort of the culture. The internal culture is more about like doing with what you have, and being smart and strategic about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would add that there's always those tensions, right? Like when United We Dream, there's like 20 staff, and their resources are always limited. Time is always limited, and there's always discussions about where do you want to put all of that time and effort. And I'm sure that's the same for all of you. What we are grounded on, though, is one, that the resources of our people are boundless, and it's not just grounded in money. It's grounded in time and their expertise and their creativity. So we have been able to figure out engagement ways where, not everybody wants to be a community organizer, and that's okay. Not everybody has the skill to do that, but we have found digital organizers. We have found people that create content and graphic designers that would have never had a platform to do that if it weren't for United We Dream and for the space for undocumented young people to come up with. And then there's also like the very committed organizers that share our long-term vision about how are we going to change the face of democracy in this country. And that takes deep organizing, patient organizing, and thinking about 10 years from now, where do we want to go? And it's not about the national politics, it's about like the district level, the county level, and how you're changing the conversation there. So yes, there's conversations and not so much debates, it's just figuring out, okay, how are we going to do both things at once?
I would add that, yeah, time and resources are limited. I mean, we've never once debated whether or not we should invest so much time in organizing our people, but we definitely have to have critical conversations about where to focus. We do have members across the country, but we have to concentrate on a few key areas where we think the voices of moms and Moms Rising members will help, get something across the finish line. So, we might put more effort on the ground in Maryland, where paid sick days is going to pass either this year or next year, versus a state where, the campaign is just starting. Like we might, just have a softer touch in a place like that. But it's totally worth it. And I think, your comment about the different ways that people get involved is something that we really talk a lot about internally. We like cake. And so at Moms Rising, we call our organizing strategy approach layer cake. Actually 7 layers. It's delicious. Don't tell our food team how many calories are in the 7-layer cake. But the whole point of the layer cake approach is that, people are busy. People are busier than they've ever been before. We welcome anybody to be part of Moms Rising. We mostly have moms. Moms are mostly working outside of the home now, and everybody's busier than ever. We're also really saturated from media content, and it's hard for organizations to kind of break through that noise to get people involved. And so what we do is we try to provide as many different ways for people to get involved and really honor that. Sometimes all you have time to do is click a link and send a message to your member of Congress. Sometimes you have time to bring your kids to the state capitol. Sometimes you have time to sew on patches on a superhero cape. And a lot of times you don't. And so what we try to do is just, each one of those actions matters deeply to us achieving our goals. And so we try to honor each one of those because, today you're just clicking, but next week you're testifying at a hearing. And so it all matters.
So say more about, if you can, about the how what the bottom of the cake is made of. It sounds like there's a lot of clicks there in the crust. Many, we hear from some of the critique, I think, that often comes up with some of the online side of member engagement is that, that some of the petitions are not really used for anything, right? Like maybe the organization's just gonna, you're gonna go off to Annapolis and do the lobbying, and the petition is just kind of like something for the website, maybe lead generation for fundraising or something like that, but there's not really a connection. What does it look like for Moms Rising when
First,
those petitions are happening?
I will tell you about the 7 layers in our cake, and then I'll tell you how we make it all happen, just so you know what those layers are, because now I suspect you might be curious. So the first layer of Moms Rising's organizing approach is collaborative work. We don't work alone. We never work alone. We don't have a policy shop by design. Mm-hmm. We work with experts like you guys who do have policy shops. And then we bring the mom voices, but we don't have a policy shop because that's not our area of expertise. We'll rely on our friends. The second layer is citizen engagement supported by technology. So those are like the clicks on the website, et cetera. The third is our citizen proxy presence. I didn't bring enough of these for everybody, but this is a deck of cards with a big superhero, pow, bam, pop. Can everybody see it? Can you see it? Okay. So on the back it says, without paid sick days, the cards are stacked against our families. The decks are stacked against our families. And it has our little sticker on it. And then sometimes we'll also put stories or notes from our members on it and deliver that, because you might not be able to get to Annapolis, but we can put your note on this card and we can take it with us. So, and also it's fun. And let's just be honest, it can get more attention than me standing in a legislator's office. And you might remember this more than you've remembered anything else I've said, is that, without paid sick days, the decks are stacked against our families. So that helps. And then the next layer is on-the-ground engagement. So those folks that can make it to it's just in Annapolis last week, so I'm going to talk a lot about Annapolis this week. Also, it's just a really fun word to say. So those people, Annapolis, everybody should just say it.
Annapolis.
It is a fun word to say. It's a beautiful town. It's where House of Cards is filmed. It's
that true?
It's on point and on trend right now, right? Annapolis. Okay, so the on-the-ground layer, engagement layer, is when folks can actually come and do that kind of stuff. And then traditional and new media outreach is the fifth layer, rapid response. We like to ride the wave and not just wave at the wave. So, for example, last week, America Ferrara's new show had a big box store show, had a segment about an employee having to give birth at work because she had no access to paid family leave. So we like to ride the rapid response moments of those and lift it up. And then the seventh layer is frosting. And the frosting is kind of like the fun cat videos or the mom videos. And, just you need some good sugar in your life to keep you going, because sometimes things get sad and sugar can help. So it's an important piece of it. People like it. I mean, people don't like our Facebook feed if it's nothing but nobody has paid sick days and everybody's sick. They don't want to interact with us like that. So we put up this really cute video a couple days ago. I'm sure you guys have seen it. It's the little baby's laying on her dad, and he keeps taking his arms off, and the little baby hands keep pulling the arms back on. I mean, it just goes on, and it's super cute. And if you haven't seen it and need a smile, you should go to our Facebook page, take a look at it, because people love it. And it gives us a chance to talk about the need for paid family leave. So the petitions, I'll be quick. A bunch of people across Maryland took action when we asked them to contact their state legislators and tell them that they want paid sick days passed and they want to pass this session. And a lot of people did that. And then a good chunk of people, in addition to signing their name to that letter, went ahead and took a couple moments to explain why paid sick days is important to them personally. One of the reasons I love working on paid sick days is that every single person in this world gets sick. So everybody has an experience with needing paid sick days, and you either have them and you've used them and you're really glad that you don't have to worry about feeding your kids or losing your job when you're home and you're sick, or you don't have them and you know how critical they are to your family, and you know that missing 3 days worth of work a month is the equivalent of your entire month's grocery budget. So everybody has an experience with needing paid sick days. And so we talk about that with our members, and a bunch of them write these heartbreaking notes about why paid sick days is important to their community. And then we put those all together in a big storybook, and a bunch of folks that were part of Moms Rising were able to come to Annapolis, and little kids, they brought their kids. We always try to make things as family-friendly as possible so people can actually do it and enjoy it and want to do it again. And the kids brought the storybooks and these decks of cards around and handed it out to state legislators. We took a ton of pictures, and then we put them in an email, and we sent them back to all the people that took action. We were like, you wrote, we delivered. We said we would do it, and we did it. And here are the pictures on Facebook and in email, and we happened to get really great media coverage of that event, so we shared clips of that too. So it's about reporting back and making sure that people feel brought along through the entire process. That it doesn't end after you click.
And I want to come back and hear more about what happens you had some other good examples you shared earlier what happens after those first steps. So we'll come back to maybe this case. Gracia, you have a different analogy. We have cakes. You guys flirt and get married with your engagement pyramid. Can you tell again? I want to give us a snapshot of what that is, but then also we'll get into the depth of it a little bit later. Tell us what happens at the very beginning. I know there were some coming out events. What are the kind of ways in which the kind of creative ways that people find their way in to your cake, your dating cake?
I'm regretting telling you that.
It's out now.
It's like an internal thing that we have where we most of United We Dream is like the oldest person that works with us is like 32. And so a lot of the world is that we relate to is talking about our lives, and most of them are our dating lives. So when we talk about our membership engagement, we ask ourselves, who is flirting with the movement? Who's interested with us? Who wants to ask us on a date and wants to come out and like, you know, maybe figure out what we want to do? Who wants to like be like steady and like go out on a date with us and be our boyfriends and our girlfriends? And then who wants to get married? Who is ready to like throw down and commit their lives to do this work? And, you know, it might sound silly, but there's deep science behind it. Some of the work that we do is just, you know, we ask ourselves, who are our people? Like, what do they want? What is their vision for the future? And where do they live? And so we have started a lot of our work in college campuses because who our people are young, undocumented people across the country. Some of them go to college. We also go to churches, Latino or like what we call ethnic markets, and we just figure out how do you engage and start a conversation there. How do you ask someone out on a date and come to your meeting? And then the really powerful moments come whenever young people get together and after being able to come out as undocumented and unafraid, and they have this like self-empowerment moment, figuring out how is it that they can find a collective identity with the people that are around them. What is it that they're going to do? And when that happens, magic happens. And so collective identity then leads to collective action. And one of the ways that we've done that is through having massive coming out events where young people in caps and gowns were asking this nation, all of you, to think about us as just any other person that lives down your block. Think about undocumented people as any college graduate that has something to give to this country, and taking the big, bold step of risking deportation and risking being detained. And a lot of our folks are LGBTQ, so risking being in solitary confinement and saying, I am undocumented, I am unafraid, and this is my vision for the country and what we're supposed to do together. So that takes us to like, you know, the marriage stage later down the road. But thinking of having those quick questions for yourself: who are your people? What do they want? What's the vision of the future?
That's great, thank you. And Anastasia, you were also talking about the values earlier when it comes to, I guess, figuring out how do we connect with people at this first stage, right? How do we connect with more people and bring them in? And that's been a huge part of, I think, the marriage equality movement. Could you say more about how you all think about that that first engagement, first relationship?
Well, first of all, I love the flirting and marriage analogy. I'm going to use
what's
that.
yours? What do you guys
Nothing that exciting. So a big part of my work is how do we communicate with people? How do we sort of communicate shared values? And I think that piece of things has been really instrumental to our success. And I'll just give you an example. You know, in the past year, we've seen an incredible movement around transgender equality. It's an issue most people in America don't know a lot of. I mean, I live in like the LGBTQ bubble, so it's hard to kind of break out of it. But it's one in which I think people are still learning about and struggling with. And so one of the things that we did is sort of took a step back, and I said, you know, who are like unassailable in terms of our culture? Like who holds a position that, you know, from a moral authority, who would be, you know, you couldn't say anything bad about them. And for me, it was moms. I said, I'm going to take a step back and say, like, what is the entry point and what's the point where people can really relate? And I did an incredibly powerful series of videos and a campaign around Moms for Transgender Equality, these great moms from across the country talking about their trans kids, and did really well for us. I think probably we're at about 4 million views collectively, and I launched it in November. But it was an entry point for people to, you know, experience something new, something that they probably had thoughts about and maybe change their perceptions. And I think that's the piece of it that's been successful for us. Like, where are the the shared values that we have, as opposed to saying you need to support this and this is why. It's sort of like beating someone with a newspaper. That actually never works. And so finding ways to sort of to open the conversation. And so we did a lot of this with influencers and validators, using high profile people on social, celebrities, et cetera, who, have a sway in our society, whether we like it or not. We did this with validators like everyday people, like moms. And in the marriage campaign, what we did was really talking about our shared values. What do we value? We value love, family, and commitment. It's not about having the same rights. It was about, those are universal values. And so our messaging around the entire campaign was about that, because that's something everyone can relate to. And so, my job is to sort of take a 30,000-foot view of things and say, where are our entry points on our issues? And how can we sort of have a dialogue? Because you don't have a dialogue by beating someone over the head with a newspaper. And I think that's where we've seen a lot of success in our movement.
That's great. I want to follow up on that a bit. We can't let you get out of here without talking about the turn the internet red moment, because it was such a big one that I think most of us encountered. And I think there was a lot among campaigner types and people like all of us in the room. I think there was a lot of hand-wringing around, this fundamental organizing and engagement axiom of, capturing information, right? And so, like, what do you do if all these people change their, what does it add up to anything? Does it matter because we don't get all their email addresses, right? And so what could it possibly have an impact, right? How did you guys deal with that?
So, yes, all of that. So first of all, it was just an incredible moment for me, for the organization, just to sort of see what I'm sure so many of you saw was an entire feed turned red. And when we set out to create this campaign, it was a very deliberate campaign. And one of the things that, as a communicator and a campaigner, I'm a planner. And so that just didn't happen. We seeded that to make that possible. Although we never thought that millions of people would participate, we seeded that campaign. And so that was weeks and weeks of beating the drum around it. Because the one thing I say is if you don't make it a big deal to your audience, it's not a big deal. So you can't just post once about something. That is your entire focus and mantra. So that's what we did. We, had a really strong campaign running behind it. We are highly entrepreneurial and opportunistic at my organization, so we really viewed those big external moments as groundbreaking, historic moments. And so when we did that campaign, I can share that there was that internally, well, what happens now? And my response was, well, when you're riding a tidal wave, you don't get off. You keep riding it. And so, the value for us and the value that I still believe in is, the points I would share with you are that, one, those conversations that people used to have offline are happen on digital. And so if you discount digital as a place for real impactful change, I think you're missing a key component to how people relate now. So digital is always at the forefront of our communication strategy. So that's the first piece of it. The second is that, it was so, I came from Greenpeace and I managed the brand there. So, as anyone's worked on brands, it's you don't fuck with your logo. I mean, that's rule 101, you don't change it. And it was letting go of something that was ours. There was some ownership and proprietary feelings about it, but we let it go because that's what we are to our core, is that we are a movement of people. And so this tendency to sort of want to bring it back to the organization, that's valuable, yes, but value in terms of changing hearts and minds, that's the bigger impact. And that's that was the success of that campaign. And so, as part of that, we saw millions of people change their logo, and I think some of the pushback that I got was, whether or not that actually made a difference. And, it was about, the whole idea of the campaign was about raising the, continuing the conversation around marriage, raising the dialogue of our issues to a national level. And so check the box, we did that. The second was about changing hearts and minds to the side of equality. And I believe, and my organization believes fundamentally, that those changes happen one conversation at a time. And so after the campaign, you know, we sort of hit the, you know, a week of media buzz where we just dominated around the campaign, we sort of took a step back and had a moment to read a lot of the letters that we received from people who, you know, some random person from high school posted something and they felt accepted by their community, which wasn't their sort of, you know, people they see, but it was their community, their built community, their chosen community on digital. And one of my favorite stories was we received a letter from a young man who had recently come out to his mother. He was a soldier in Arkansas, and you can imagine what it's like to be gay in Arkansas. It's really hard. And specifically in the military community. And he had come out to his mother, who was a born-again Christian, and that conversation had not gone well. And in fact, they hadn't spoken since he had come out. But she changed her profile picture to the red logo. And she posted something that said, you know, I may not agree with his choices, but he's still my baby. And you don't mess with my baby. I love you, Justin, for who you are. And he said that for the first time, he felt loved and accepted for who he was. So it may not have resulted in a donation to the organization. She might not have even known it was the Human Rights Campaign, but that is the power that campaigns can have, and that is the power of conversations, and which is why, you know, we put so much effort to, you know, the culture piece of things, of changing hearts and minds, because, you know, not only did we bring a mom and a son together again, but we change someone's mind on an issue, and that's the real value, and that's intrinsic to our long-term success as a movement.
Thank you. That's a great story. Grace, I'm curious your reflections on that. I imagine a lot of similarities, but also some differences in how you think about movement moments and identity. I wonder if you could just give us a few words on how everything Anastasia said would translate kind of through your world, your view.
I just want to thank you for sharing that story. It's, I think it hit at a lot of the points that we want to ensure that that our work does, which is that it's grounded in the people which this issue affects. It's not an issue, it's not a policy platform, it's people's lives and how they're able to show up every day. For United We Dream, I would feel that it's a similar approach of just letting go. We're an organization that was built off of a movement moment, of a spark, where millions of people came out into the streets in 2006 and said, we have had enough. And you've seen the streets of LA, of Dallas, of all across the country, people saying, like, we are here and we want to figure out, like, how is it that we include ourselves into the we the people mantra. And so at the core of what we do is to center the people that are most directly affected into the work. They are the strategists, the people that build the architecture, and they're the people that build the communication and what is it that we say to the country and to the world. I agree with the point that we will not have been able to be successful at all without the people and the allies around us that believed in what we had to contribute to the country. And the work that we've done has led to the largest and most significant victory in the immigrant rights movement in the last 40 years. We have just won relief from deportation for more than 5 million people, and it's stuck in the Supreme Court. Yesterday, United We Dream, undocumented immigrant youth, wrote an amicus brief to the Supreme Court, and I didn't know what that was 5 months ago, and now we were able to write it ourselves. And so I think for us, it's about the hearts and minds change, and that's a long-term loving work that we need to ensure to how to do that. But we're using digital and the digital tools to bring people together on the ground for them to have living room and kitchen countertop conversations about what does it mean to be an immigrant, what does it mean to be someone of color in this country, someone black, someone poor. So yeah, that's the approach that we take.
And so moving to kind of the final chapter of our conversation here about depth, and the people that you're referring to here are also, you have groups and chapters, right? Could you tell us more about how everything you've just been describing is powered or not by what are the movement leaders doing day to day? Like, what role are they playing in all these groups in the states? Because there's only, you said 20, how many staff?
26.
Right. So you're clearly not in
No.
every location doing all the organizing yourselves, right?
Yeah, so I think that the exciting thing about United We Dream is that we are built upon relationships and upon organizing. And so I can tell you a story about Dani. She's an organizer in the South Valley of Texas. She organizes around LGBTQ issues. She organizes around immigration with an LGBTQ lens. So she's able to bring people together. And we come together every 2 years to figure out what our agenda is for the next year. So there's consensus. There's a large process of a lot of conference calls and agendas, and the internal fights that all of us sort of might have. And when you're thinking together about what the future looks like. But I think that the beauty of United We Dream is that it's owned by our membership. It's operated by our membership, and Dani in the Valley is able to articulate that our vision includes centering trans women into our work and being able to talk about that. What does it mean to be undocumented and a transgendered woman in this country? And so the way that we talk is like weekly conference calls, just like I'm sure a lot of us are used to the codes and like some of the music. But the thing that keeps us together and rooted, and the thing that keeps people coming into United We Dream is the shared stories, the shared collective identity, the shared vision of what is it that we want to do together, and then also just the relationships. Being able to go down to the ground to Texas and have a taco with Dani has meant more for our work than me sending her a memo about like what the policy priorities are.
Thanks. So, Ruth, on that relationship building front that we're talking about, like that sharing the taco, you guys have your own versions of that, right? Or, sorry, I shouldn't say you guys. Like Moms Rising, you were telling me some unique things that you do. So if you have people showing up with the cards action and people at the top of is it fair to say the top of the cake?
Yeah.
Who are
Yeah.
showing up above and beyond. What are some of the things that you do to acknowledge that they're there and you care about them?
Well,
They're critical.
so last week in Annapolis, again, I'm going to talk a lot about Maryland. There was a hearing. Monday started off with a press conference about the need for paid family leave insurance. One of our members came and testified at a press conference about that. Tuesday and Thursday, there were hearings on the paid sick days bill. Those are two different issues, but obviously they're interconnected. We had a Moms Rising member at each one of those events sharing her personal story, and for each time, it was the first time that member had taken that step. And that's huge.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time. This is labor-intensive work. I mean, there are shortcuts and hacks that you can come up with to make it easier and to track and do that kind of stuff, but it is time well spent, I think, and it is a lot of time that we've spent with these members kind of honing their remarks and helping them feel comfortable. And a large part of the way that we help them feel comfortable in order to share their story is, again, it's that shared identity. Like when you start talking about it, you get a bunch of moms in the room, and being a mom can really level the playing field in a lot of ways, and you have a lot of shared experiences, and a lot of us have experience with not having enough time with our child before we have to go back to work, and the things that can happen when you have to go back to work within weeks. 20% of women in this country are back at work within 2 weeks of giving birth. That's not easy. And there can be serious physical ramifications for everybody involved from doing that. And we had moms kind of testifying about that. And so we talked about that, and we shared these experiences, and we share with them that when they're telling their personal story, they're standing there for all the moms and dads who can't be there. And I think our members find that particularly empowering, knowing that they're not alone, and their experience is representative of so many. So it's a lot of hand-holding. But afterwards, we sent all of those folks flowers. I mean, we just kind of build this into our budget. Like, they took the time And we really want to honor that. So we send them flowers, but we follow up with them and we ask them to maybe write down their experience so we can post it as a blog and lift them up. We happen to have a radio show, and a number of people have done this for us, have gone on to share, their experience with the radio show, and it builds up this confidence. Like our members, they cared about it, but now they feel even more invested in it because they were there and they saw the sausage getting made in Annapolis or wherever it was. And it really matters, and it creates this increased sense of attachment to the organization and buy-in to the issue and the initiative that they'll then take and bring in more people. We've also had a couple of times where we've got to do something really fun, like a member shared her healthcare story about not having coverage and the challenges that was putting on her family, and she got one of our emails and she just wrote her heart out, sharing her experience, and we followed up with her and turned her story into a blog post. That blog post got picked up by the White House. The president invited her to come to an event with her son in the backyard at somebody's house during the ACA passage, so she got to meet the president with her son, and that's a big deal. And she was really excited about it, understandably so. And then the media picked that up, and then she ended up doing additional interviews after that fact, feeling more empowered about sharing her experience, and then went on to write and then wrote emails, that we helped her write, but wrote emails that we sent to our membership kind of involving them. So we send them flowers. Sometimes we send them to the White House.
Yeah.
I wish we could do that all the time. But it's just making sure that people know that it really does matter, the time that they took.
We're going to get some more questions in from the room at this point, I think. But I just love these stories of things that you don't get to see on the website, right? You can't go to you can't go to momsrising.org and see the tactics of how they send flowers to the people, some of the most engaged activists, things like that. So thank you. What questions in the room can we bring into the conversation here? What's jumped to mind for you, or I saw half a hand there. Yeah, go for it. Oh, and I think because of our viewers at home, we'll do a microphone. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Rose. I work at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and we manage the Election Protection Coalition, and I work significantly on that program. And one thing that is kind of a difference for our organizing than you all is that our members or our like key constituency are a bunch of lawyers, and those are the folks that are like on our email list and stuff. And that's in separation from the people that we're serving, who are the voters experiencing problems or questions at the polling place a lot. And so, I guess just wondering if you guys have tactics or other ways that you guys have done things where maybe your folks are not as much the ones impacted by the work that you're doing, and strategies for involving those members on a more personal level when they're not necessarily the impacted individuals.
Yeah, so with United We Dream, we started off sort of like with the DREAM Act was about education, and we saw that there was a lot of educators that really cared about the issue and wanted to ensure that there was a way that they were able to provide the skills, the space, and the parameters for young people to be able to flourish in their classrooms. And so we started the Dream Educational Empowerment Program, DEEP. And I think so what we've been able to do is that we center our people around our work, but then you create nodes of things of how do you bring in people into your conversation, because you can't do it alone. And so with those, so we have a list of about 80,000 educators in college campuses, high schools, and elementary schools. And every year we have engagement points for them. So right now we're preparing for the National Institutional Coming Out Day, which is like where universities say, like, my university is a safe space for undocumented people, and they can come, and these are the things that I've done to create that space. So I would say that think about like what is it that they care about, think about what is it that they how is it that you can give meaning to the lawyers spending countless times sort of or nights thinking about like voter engagement or the issue that you care about, and how is that connected to their own values, and what do they care about, and what give them an actionable thing to be able to do. That's what I would say.
And we don't all have to answer unless anyone has something that they want to throw in. Great. Thanks, please. Yeah. Oh, sorry. We'll go behind and then come forward. Okay.
Hi. Really enjoyed hearing about a lot of these creative strategies and tactics, and just was curious for how you evaluate these and how you brainstorm to come up with these, and then how you evaluate them after you've conducted them. Thank you.
Great question.
At Moms Rising, we are, like I'm sure a lot of you are, data junkies. We have staff meetings every Monday. We're virtual, so we're all calling in, we're all on the phone, we're scattered across the country. And we have Metrics Mondays where we test everything and we talk about it. And we talk about open rates and click rates and what subject lines are working, and we test subject lines, and we test, like, okay, let me tell you that superhero capes will get a lot more media attention than not having superhero capes. It matters. Superhero capes will get more attention than kids dressed up like doctors in scrubs, which is also very cute, but the capes will win. So you may want to deploy your capes strategically. And we know that because we track it. And we talk about it, and we brainstorm, ideas, and then we test them. And if they work, we futz with them and try them again and again and again. And sometimes they'll work for a long time. And at some point, I think you reach a saturation point in North Carolina where we have a huge group on the ground doing a lot of work. They have declining press coverage of their early voting parades because I think, they're still important, and the members love them. The media doesn't cover it as much, I think, because they're like, oh, they're the Moms Rising kids are doing an early voting parade again. So you have to kind of think of something new to do. I'm sure you run into this a lot, doing marketing kind of things. Like, something will work for a while and then it won't. But we test and we test and we test, and when something doesn't work, we talk about why it doesn't work, and we kick it around a lot, and we're not afraid to make mistakes.
I think, so much of our work is proactive, but it's also reactive. So for this year, we had 185 anti-LGBTQ bills. We track all of them and oftentimes respond to all of them. We're down to 110 this session. But, almost every day in the state legislative session, it's been something that we sort of have to respond to. I think one of the things from measurement perspective that I would kind of add to this conversation is we're not really afraid to take risk. We're not afraid to try something new, to try a platform. Sometimes it works and works really spectacularly. Sometimes it doesn't. But I think that's part of the thing is that I personally feel that you can't always be testing something. Sometimes you just have to do it and see what happens and sort of jump in both feet. I have an organizational culture that likes that. So I think that helps, but that's been part of our, we don't have any fear of testing things. So I think that's something that's worked really well for us from a cultural perspective and sort of allows us to be very reactive and very quickly and not sort of hindered by, well, are we concerned that this is going to work? Because there is an urgency to the work that we do.
Could you tell us also briefly about the rapid response fire drills that you have there?
We used to call them that, and now we call them Tuesday because it is literally. I mean, it's crazy. We had a 39-hour filibuster last night that we've been monitoring. The week before that, it was South Dakota governor. We had him veto something, which was amazing. But we've become really accustomed to a rapid response culture, which just means that, from our perspective, we constantly shift to the next thing. So we execute, we shift, we execute, we shift, we execute, we shift. It means for a lot of us, especially during this busy time, we've been going since about January 15th. We've created a very, very tight, streamlined culture in terms of approval process, from everything from a press release, image share, blog post, tweet, to who the influencers are that we're reaching out to, who are our targets, who's connecting with business. And we've gotten that down to about an hour and a half in terms of our turnaround time. And it's only through the process of doing that daily for sometimes that's honed us to that level. It's I think something that we're probably doing pretty well. I, worry about my staff from a long-term perspective about being able to execute like that. But I think that's part of it, that we're just doing it, and we don't spend a lot of time talking about it. We just do. And so that, I think, it also helps from a top-down perspective if that is your organizational culture, in terms of its leadership really embraces that and appreciates that. That's helped us in our work. And I think, I don't like it all the time, but it is effective to be able to insert yourself into a dialogue.
Let's do one last question. I know you had your hand up here, and then I have one as well to close us out.
Yeah, I think one of the things, one of the things that I thought was really interesting was when you said about coming back to your members, about other members' engagement and how that was effective in building up new people who maybe hadn't been involved before.
We can hear you.
Yeah.
We'll repeat it. Yeah.
I guess, what other stories do you have of that, where that's worked, where that's failed, and what the best strategies are to make sure that the stories of the members who are doing the incredible work on the ground is lifted up through digital means to get the next person, be that individual weeks or months or years from now.
So is that how do we move people along? And
I guess not how do you feel of like how do you share the stories of success of member engagement to
great,
Thank you.
great. Thanks.
Well, I love how Moms Rising is really thanking people. I mean, that's the first thing. You have to say thank you. And the people that are sort of that discount, like taking a click or something like that, that's really hard to get people to do. And so I think culturally, especially on the progressive side, we need to be doing a much better job of appreciating the people that are doing something. So I really applaud your efforts. I think that's really important.
You might appreciate that at our staff retreat a couple years when we were talking about how we need to do a better job of really honoring people's work in whatever way that they can do it. We dubbed it our aggressively welcoming rainbow. Because we like to have fun with things, but it is about just trying to keep in mind all the different barriers to engagement that your constituency has. Just brainstorm it, talk about it, talk about how you can fix it. So for us, it's childcare, it's schedules, it's whether or not people have access to public transportation, it's whether or not, it's how people are using the internet, if they're using it. Most people are, but a growing portion of our constituency is using it primarily on their devices. And so how do we make it easier? And we just had a long brain dump of what is keeping our people from participating. And we would talk with them about it too. And then try to address it. And then we called it an aggressively welcoming rainbow. And we drew pictures.
I love all
because
the
that's
lingo
what
we're
we
getting
are.
through.
Yes.
Grace, do you have anything on this?
Yeah, I would just add that, so it's kind of like my mom. If she says that I'm really smart and all the time, sometimes it wears off. So part of our strategy is to say, yes, we appreciate you, we love you. Let's bring you together to share your experiences of like what it was like to step into your leadership. But the other piece is just building up our brand in a way that other people are talking about the impact that our membership is making. So, it's taken some time, but like now you have like presidential candidates holding roundtables with dreamers and getting our input on policy. And you cannot imagine what that means for, folks down in like Mississippi or in Georgia that are trying to just get their way into school. And so for us, it's just encouraging and building the leadership of people to be able to get to those spaces, but then have other quote unquote validators talk about like the impact that the work is having on the country.
That's great. We're gonna have to wrap soon. I have so much respect for the work you're doing, the organizations you're part of, and each of you individually, especially, which has grown through this conversation. If today were the last day on the job for you, and you had to train us all in 10 minutes to do your difficult jobs, what one piece of advice, based on all the experience you've accumulated in this field, would you leave us with? And we can go in any order.
I think, right now in the political landscape, we're seeing a really divisive space. And I I think the thing that I have taken away from this is that change is really possible, and that you have to have a conversation, and you can't have a conversation by shouting. We saw in the past 4 to 5 years the most rapid acceptance on our issues that we had ever seen. And that was only due to people coming out, people having conversations, the high visibility around it. And so I guess I would say to my successor that you kind of have to believe in people's power or people's ability to change their minds. And you have to work really hard in order to do that, and not be afraid to take a risk, because there's so little time to actually make that change. And I think that's another key part of our success, is that, we took risks, and, with it is great reward. So I think that's something that, I would love to see the progressive movement embrace a little bit more.
Thanks. I guess we can just go down the line.
It's a tough question. I just came into my role about less than a year ago, so.
So you're not ready to be done yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
But what I would say to whoever follows me is that what I've learned so far is that presence is not power. Just because there's dreamers on TV or in presidential campaigns does not mean that we have the leverage to win the policy and the dignity for our people, and that people are power. People coming together, sharing their stories. And so anything that has to do with our politics, our policy, our organizing has to be centered around the people that are directly affected, and those people need to feel empowered, because that's the only way where we have ever seen change, and where we will ever be able to make this country one that, that we can all be proud of, and does not allow for spaces like Donald Trump, like Ted Cruz, like Marco Rubio, to be able to talk about people like my mother in the way that they have.
I would say that you need to use humor, and you need to use it effectively. Studies have shown you can't logic a person out of their position. I mean, we know that's true. We know voter ID is a terrible thing, and it's really hard to logic people out of it. You have to use humor. There's a lot of humor that comes with being a parent. If you're not laughing about diaper explosions, then you're going to cry about them, and I'd rather laugh. So I think that you can really use, that using humor effectively is an incredibly important tool. So that's what you should do. Tell jokes about dirty diapers.
Diaper explosions. Good note to end on. Thank you all for our panelists for an incredible round of insights and sharing all of your examples and revealing the inside of your organizations with us. Can we give them all a round of applause, please?